As many of y'all know, I've been on YouTube now for a little over a dozen years making woodworking related content mostly. And, to get that kind of knowledge, I had about a dozen years beforehand as I was building up my craft, playing around that kind of stuff. And over that time frame, you kind of notice waves in different niches of the craft. What becomes popular, what doesn't. And when you do that, when the zeitgeist, the media, people that control the media really do focus on it. Now, when I first started out, I kind of call myself the magazine age because it was kind of the heyday of fine woodworking and popular woodworking. It was pre-internet, people were still watching VHSs and DVDs, so there wasn't a lot of content out there. And, we were just getting into the renaissance of hand tools. The generation, like right before me, where popular mechanics was where a lot of people were going to get their woodworking knowledge, that kind of stuff. You saw a lot of interest in things like shopsmiths and radial arm saws, that kind of stuff. There's just kind of each generation has what's really focused on, where you just get inundated with a lot of information about a specific tool or niche like that. Well, along that way, I think a lot of tools kind of get overlooked. They aren't as appreciated as much. So in this shop, I just want to talk about a few hand tools that I think really are underappreciated in the content you see on the internet. So welcome back to Worth the Effort Woodworking as we talk about some underappreciated hand tools. If there's one tool in my entire collection that I could see spending an exorbitantly large amount of money, going to a boutique custom tool maker, getting one with unnecessary bling on it just to show my appreciation for it, it would be the most common tool I use. One that sees contact with every piece of wood that goes into a project for the most part, and just general use around my shop. And that is my marking knife. Marking knives really are an unsung hero, and I am very loyal to the spear point style because it offers so much more functionality than any other style I've come across. And what it is, it's got the two bevels on the side that come up to a rounded point. I'll talk about that later in a second. And it's got a flat back. That way I can mark things left and right, registering right against them right there. And you can see that mine has, right now it's got a little glue from tape and stuff like that. It's broken off here. But this generic thick-bladed marking knife is mine. It fits comfortably in my hand. I know that for some reason this flat right here is slightly off on mine as a manufacturing defect, but it's gotten to the point where it feels right, which is why I haven't upgraded to it, just because this is my knife. Now, I've bought other spear point marking knives to loan out, but these are a little bit thinner and more flexible, and I just don't feel as confident in them, and the smaller handles just don't feel as nice. They are completely functional, and I've had those knives that you actually have to have two knives that come to a single point so you can do left and right work and that kind of stuff. I've had knives where the bevel comes both sides, like just a traditional knife, where you have to kind of hold it at an angle instead of flat against something. You have to kind of hold it at an angle to get it to work properly. I just don't like those because they aren't my knife. There's a reason why I like this design. And I use these side points almost as much as I use the tip. Cleaning out dovetail waste, I will shove that in there, and you can get a lot of leverage on something by using that inside corner. And when you sharpen them, you actually don't want to sharpen them to a razor point. I only go up to about 1,000 grit on mine, and I will actually come back over and I will roll over the tip so this is rounded on top, because they will break off if you get them come to a certain point. But that rounding action just gives me a nicer line as I'm working stuff, because I'm not at the same angle all the time. So if you're like me and you're a hand tool woodworker, I am willing to bet you have developed a very toxic relationship with your marking knife. Not toxic from it to you, but you to them, because you have underappreciate this thing so much. You abuse it so much, and yet it will never fail you, and it will be something you reach for all the time. If mine isn't here, it is over here because I'm using it. Most underappreciated tool that I think you should probably do a little bit more research on, a little bit more experimentation on, and find one that you want to develop a relationship with, because it'll be with you for the rest of your life. Number 2 is probably going to be one you think is a bit of an oddball, but go with me on this one. It's the one I've come to just in this past few years, but it too is also something that I use in almost every project nowadays. Popsicle sticks. There really is no better glue spreader other than maybe one of the silicone paddles. Spatulas that you get $1 at the kitchen store. But these are too big for most of my work. If you're doing fine joinery like dovetails and stuff like that, and you need to spread just a little bit of glue on the inside of the tails without, getting it everywhere, the popsicle stick is perfect. And after you've glued it up, after you've gotten all the squeeze out, nothing is better for removing squeeze out than a popsicle stick with an edge. It just gets into the corners. You can kind of angle it however you want. If you want to create a double bevel on it, there you go. It'll get the top and bottom depending upon what kind of angle you work it. I mean, these are just great. Plus, how many of y'all ever have loose joints? Maybe your Morrison tenon is a little bit sloppy or something like that and you want to tighten it up. Well, guess what? These make excellent shims for like hidden areas. I use these all the time in like sliding dovetails. I think I did it in a video a while back. You basically actually enlarge your error a little bit, and then you can glue these on there and then just replane them down until you get the perfect fit. A little glue on both sides and it will be as strong as anything else. Plus, a lot of them are made out of softer woods, like these I think are soft maple. So they have a tiny bit of compression. So if you're working with really, really hard woods, you can put these on the outside and it will crush its way down to the perfect fit. So popsicle sticks, if you don't have a small box of popsicle sticks in your shop, just get a set. They're cheap. Next up, how many of y'all have a push drill? Yeah, one of those tools from the 30s and 40s. I went on a buying spree a few years ago and bought a classroom set of these just because I didn't ever want to run out of them, because they are so useful if you're assembling work using nails and screws and hardware and stuff, like installing hinges, that kind of stuff. It's just so quick and easy. This was the cordless drill of its day. And basically what it is as you plunge this down, it has some screws in here that twists the drill bit in one direction. And then you pull it out and it re-springs out. So while on a YouTube channel you might get a lot of juvenile comments in how they are used, basically just pick them up and push down on them and then pull out. As simple as that, you've got a hole. Warning, to avoid those juvenile comments, don't hold it like this. Now most of the later model ones, they have these little catches where you can actually store different size bits in them. Though because of how I use it, mainly for pre-drilling for screws and tapered nails and that kind of stuff, I just leave this one sitting in my shelf right there, and it is super easy. Now, if I'm doing something like a hinge where I need to be pretty accurate with that one, a lot of times I will take an awl and I will kind of pre-make a dimple to get it started. But other than that, this is faster than any drill I have. They just don't get as much appreciation nowadays because they're a vintage tool that a lot of people don't have in their tool collection. Go grab yourself one. Next, let's talk about a tool that is not only underappreciated, it's often maligned. Square screwdrivers. I have two. And that's because I really only use 2-size screws for most of my casework. A small one for fine boxes and stuff like that, and my casework size, which works on a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch board with about that same amount going into the other piece. And why these are so cool is back in the day, they actually designed screws to work with the screwdrivers, which they don't today. And here's what I mean. If you look at this, this is a gunsmithing screwdriver, which they still make now, so you don't have to go find vintage ones, but they're actually machined on the bottom. See that? That machining diameter is designed to fit a specific style screw, because a properly made screw, the thread is actually cut at a very, very slight dovetail. So it is ever so slightly too small for the screwdriver. You have to actually push it in. Hence, it sticks great. Everyone's talking about the Robinsons and all those kind of stuff. These original screws were designed to work with specific screwdrivers, and nothing better out there. The problem is that we are just so accustomed to the general screwdrivers that they've been producing since probably the late 50s and early 60s, because tool manufacturers realized that the majority of people just threw it in one in their junk drawer to use around the house, and they didn't really size them to all the different screws that they had around there. So if you have a standard wood screw, well, if you built a screwdriver that was tapered, it would fit a wider variety of screws. So you could just push it into the slot as far as it needed to go in order to touch the sides, or even not touch the sides. The problem is that put all the pressure on a corner. And if you had pushed it all the way to the bottom and twisted it a little bit, all that pressure went on just 2 corners. Right there and there and there. So, they wallered out because they were tapered. They backed out. But if you have a square-sided one that fits perfectly, it's not going to put more pressure on one area. Well, technically it does, but it spreads that pressure out all along here in both directions, because the other side is just that's beyond this point. They just work much, much better. Get yourself a good set of gunsmithing screwdrivers, because they still make them to fit the actual screws that you're using there. And you can go to some specialty screw stores and just buy you a couple boxes of 1 or 2, maybe 3 different sizes that you just go say, I'll use these for my career. You don't need 100 different sizes of screws. Next, let's talk about probably the most common blade made today. I keep a box of them over here because they're infinitely disposable yet useful. A razor blade. Just how many uses are there for this thing? Yes, you can put them in one of those, carpentry knife holders, and you could actually use this as a marking knife. Just remember, you have to put it at a slight bevel to get it right up next to it, but it's so thin, really does that matter that much? I know a lot of people that will use these for chip carving because they don't want to sharpen up their chip carving knife. So they'll just put these in one of those carpentry things and go to town chip carving. I know I use it a lot for really fine scraping because they are somewhat flexible, so you can get that nice little edge, and oh man, how easy is that? Getting smooth shavings to just a nice little area done up. There's just so many uses for a box of razor blades. Just be careful that when you're done with them, how you dispose of them. A lot of times I'll put blue tape around it. Now I'm going to also leave you with a bonus. I'm calling this one a bonus because it does require electricity, but it is one of the most underappreciated tools in a hand tool woodworking shop, and that's the grinder. Specifically, you really do want to get a 6-inch slow speed grinder. Now I use 8-inch wheels for just about everything in my shop, with the exception of my hand tools. And I specifically have always had at least one grinder or one wheel that is 6 inches, because I don't use this for sharpening, but every single edge tool I use, I generally have to just kind of remove bulk metal away. So I will remove bulk metal at the bottom of my blades by simply grinding on it here. And I can freehand it a lot of times by resting my hand here, and I've just kind of gotten a touch for it. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that one, you want to invest in an accessory to your grinder of some kind of really stable platform. And when I mean stable, I mean you bang on it and it is not going to move at all. That one that they come with it, a lot of times they're just pressed metal that are attached to these. You can flex them, and that is not good. And then you can pretty much set this at an angle that you want forever, and then just kind of touch up these. It sure does make sharpening on water stones or diamond stones or stuff like that a lot easier if all you're having to do is sharpen the top. And I get the coarsest grit you can find, because the coarser the grit, the less it's making contact with the blade to remove the metal, so it actually doesn't heat it up as fast. So you can sit there and grind on it a little bit more. One of the advantages of using these diamond kind of, or cubic, some kind of diamond stone, artificial diamond stone, is they are on a metal base, so this actually acts like a heat sink. So you can really grind on them without overheating it very quickly, because this just absorbs all the heat. Whereas in normal friable stones, your tool absorbs all the heat, and there isn't that much metal at the tip of your tool. That's why they heat up so fast. And most of these are lifetime investments. You don't run them that often. They're generally induction motors instead of universal motors. You just want to make sure that if you're buying them used, you spin them to make sure that the arbor is completely perfect, because I've even bought new ones where the arbor was slightly off, so you ended up with a little bit of wave, which on a friable wheel, you can grind the wheel down to make it perfect, but it's just never really right. And if you ever step up to higher quality wheels that are a locked fixed position, which I highly recommend because you don't get all that abrasive dust in the air, an arbor that's off is just no good. So, I only spent, I think, $100 on this one when I got it brand new. And I have another one that we just didn't have room over here that I picked up at a garage sale, and it's just perfectly fine. So you can find these out there really inexpensively, and then just invest in a good wheel and a good platform, and you will have a lifetime tool that you will use all the time. So much so it will become second nature, and you won't appreciate it. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, picked up a few tips, tricks like that, maybe some ideas for inexpensive tools you can go get that you will use all the time. And remember that it is always worth the effort to learn new stuff, create new things. So I didn't really create anything here other than a video telling y'all how cheap I am using popsicle sticks and razor blades. But I am sharing it with you. Y'all be safe and have fun.